Do you think food only disappears because people stop liking it? Think again. What if some of the most comforting dishes in American history were quietly erased from our kitchens, not because they lost their flavor, but too dangerous to exist? In the middle of the 20th century, white sauce pasta was more than food. It was warmth after day. It was Sunday dinner in modest homes, candlelit meals in neighborhood restaurants, and handwritten recipes passed between generations. Cream, butter, cheese, and noodles became the language of comfort in an age searching for stability. But behind some of these beloved dishes was a truth no one wanted. Ingredients once praised as modern, clever, or even healthier were later found to carry hidden risks. Preservatives, sweeteners, dyes, cookware, and cooking methods that defined an era were slowly questioned, restricted, and finally removed. Tonight, we're not just revisiting recipes, we're uncovering the forgotten stories behind 15 white sauce pasta dishes that were once cherished, quietly banned, or abandoned. These are meals your grandparents may have eaten without a second thought. Dishes that filled homes with warmth before science changed everything. This is not just a list of lost foods, it's a journey through memory, innovation, and the price of progress. Let's begin with the first plate that disappeared. 1. Cyclamate cream Alfredo. In the mid 20th century, American kitchens were experimenting in ways that now feel both daring and curious. Among the most unusual creations was cyclamate cream Alfredo, a version of the classic Italian white sauce made richer with cream yet subtly sweetened with cyclamate, a newly popular artificial sweetener. At the time, cyclamate was celebrated as a marvel. It promised all the pleasure of sugar without the calories, a dream for homemakers and diners alike. Families who had grown up savoring traditional creamy pastas found themselves intrigued by this strange, almost futuristic twist on a familiar comfort food. Cyclamate cream Alfredo became a quiet sensation in homes and small diners. Its appeal lay in its contradiction. It was indulgent, yet marketed as light, luxurious, yet modern. Housewives included it in mid-century cookbooks, serving it alongside freshly boiled noodles, while small restaurants advertised it as a sophisticated yet health-conscious option. There was a certain thrill in tasting it, as if consuming something from the future, a sweetened sauce that still captured the richness of cream and the familiar bite of Parmesan. For a brief moment, it seemed like the perfect balance of tradition and innovation. But the recipe's success was short-lived. By 1969, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration banned cyclamate after studies suggested a possible link to cancer in laboratory animals. What had once been a popular, comforting dish was suddenly declared unsafe, forcing families and chefs alike to abandon it. Recipes were removed from cookbooks, restaurant menus quietly changed, and the sweet, creamy taste that once delighted a generation faded into memory. Today, cyclamate cream Alfredo lives on only in nostalgia. Those who remember it speak of it with a mix of wonder and longing, recalling a taste that seemed to promise both indulgence and restraint, a flavor that never truly returned. It's a reminder of how food trends, health scares, and regulations shape the dishes we grow up with, and how some recipes disappear almost as quickly as they arrive. 2. Raw milk béarnaise pasta. In the kitchens of the 1950s and early 60s, some home cooks and adventurous chefs swore by raw milk for creating richer, more flavorful sauces. One of the most daring examples was raw milk béarnaise pasta, a dish that combined the classic French béarnaise sauce with fresh, unpasteurized milk, folded gently into tender noodles. The sauce carried a depth and creaminess impossible to achieve with pasteurized dairy, offering a taste that was at once luxurious, earthy, and uniquely alive. For those who experienced it, the flavor lingered in memory like a secret indulgence, a glimpse into a world where freshness trumped convenience. Raw milk was more than just an ingredient. It represented a connection to the farm, to traditions that predated industrialized food. Families who made this sauce often sourced their milk from local dairies, visiting morning markets or even neighboring farms, choosing products they trusted with their own hands. Serving raw milk béarnaise pasta was as much about pride and skill as it was about taste. It was a dish that spoke to a slower, more tactile approach to cooking, a stark contrast to the rising wave of processed, standardized foods that would soon dominate American kitchens. But what was once celebrated for its richness and authenticity quickly became controversial. By the late 1960s, public health authorities began cracking down on unpasteurized dairy due to the risks of bacterial contamination. Recipes that relied on raw milk, once symbols of artisanal care, were suddenly deemed unsafe for home cooking. Raw milk béarnaise pasta vanished from cookbooks and restaurant menus almost overnight, leaving only whispered recollections among those who had tasted it. Families who had treasured its flavor and texture were forced to adapt, often resorting to pasteurized milk that lacked the same depth and character. Today, raw milk béarnaise pasta survives only in nostalgia, remembered as a fleeting culinary treasure from a time when the simplest ingredient, fresh milk straight from the farm, could transform a plate of noodles into something extraordinary. It's a reminder that not every delicious innovation survives the scrutiny of science and regulation, and some tastes, no matter how cherished, are destined to fade into history. 3. Lead pan garlic cream spaghetti. In mid-century American kitchens, cookware was just as much a part of a recipe's magic as its ingredients. One dish that captured both flavor and a hidden danger was lead pan garlic cream spaghetti. Chefs would slowly simmer creamy garlic sauces in heavy metal pans, often made of lead or lead-lined alloys, believing it added a certain richness and smoothness to the sauce. The result was a decadently silky pasta, with garlic and cream melding into a flavor that felt indulgent, almost luxurious, far beyond the reach of everyday dinners. For many families, this was a weekday treat transformed into something extraordinary. The dish wasn't just about sustenance, it was about ritual. A mother stirring the sauce on a stovetop, the gentle aroma of garlic filling the kitchen, the noodles perfectly coated in cream, it all created a sense of comfort and sophistication that made ordinary evenings feel like an occasion. Restaurants also experimented with lead cookware for specialty sauces, unaware that their pursuit of culinary perfection carried invisible risks. The twist in this story is, of course, the danger that came with the flavor. Lead is toxic, and even small amounts can accumulate in the body over time. Back then, the harmful effects were not widely understood, so families and diners unknowingly consumed tiny doses with each indulgent meal. By the late 1960s, public health awareness increased, and cookware regulations were tightened, forcing cooks to abandon lead-lined pans. Recipes like lead pan garlic cream spaghetti disappeared from menus and kitchens, leaving behind only stories of how remarkably smooth and flavorful they had been. Today, the memory of lead pan garlic cream spaghetti carries both nostalgia and a cautionary note. Those who recall it speak of a flavor that was almost impossibly rich, yet tinged with a sense of lost innocence, a time when the pursuit of taste outpaced the understanding of safety. It serves as a reminder of how culinary history is shaped not just by innovation and tradition, but also by the hidden lessons learned when experimentation collides with science. 4. Sassafras cream noodles. In the kitchens of mid-20th century America, experimentation with flavors was a quiet obsession. Among the most unusual creations was sassafras cream noodles, a pasta dish infused with the warm, slightly spicy essence of sassafras root. The sauce was velvety, subtly aromatic, and carried a nostalgic sweetness, reminiscent of the root beer that had long been a favorite American beverage. For families and diners alike, it was an adventurous yet comforting dish, something that evoked the smell of old-fashioned candy shops and Sunday dinners, a taste that lingered in memory long after the plate was empty. Sassafras cream offered more than flavor. It represented a connection to traditional herbal remedies and regional cooking, particularly in southern kitchens. Home cooks who crafted this dish often gathered sassafras from local forests or purchased it in small apothecaries, believing it brought both taste and a hint of healthfulness to their meals. Serving sassafras cream noodles was a way to celebrate local ingredients and experiment with flavors that felt both exotic and familiar, bridging the gap between European inspired cream sauces and distinctly American culinary traditions. But this beloved recipe carried a hidden risk. Sassafras oil contains safrole, a compound later discovered to cause liver damage in laboratory studies. By the early 1960s, the FDA banned its use in commercially sold foods and drinks, effectively removing saffron from home cooking recipes like this one. Families who had once cherished the gentle, aromatic notes of sassafras cream noodles were suddenly forced to abandon it. The dish vanished from cookbooks and dinner tables, leaving behind only memories of its unique fragrance and creamy texture. Today, sassafras cream noodles exists only in nostalgia, a fleeting reminder of a time when American home cooks were willing to explore unusual ingredients, when cream sauces could carry both comfort and curiosity. It is remembered as a dish that captured imagination, flavor, and the subtle thrill of culinary adventure, quietly fading from history as health regulations reshaped the way Americans cooked and ate. 5. Coal tar dyed Parmesan sauce. In those war years, American kitchens and diners were not just chasing flavor, they were chasing appearances. One of the more curious creations of the era was coal tar dyed Parmesan sauce, a creamy pasta topping made visually striking with the addition of early synthetic food dyes. The sauce was still rich and flavorful, but its unusual coloring made it pop on the plate, catching the eye of diners and home cooks alike. What might seem strange today was then a symbol of culinary modernity, food that looked as exciting as it tasted. For families and small restaurants, the brightly tinted sauce was a way to transform an ordinary meal into something playful and impressive. Dinner tables became a place for experimentation, and home cooks proudly recreated recipes from magazines, believing that a little color could elevate not only the dish, but the dining experience itself. Children were often the most enthusiastic fans, drawn to the novelty of neon-hued cream sauces that made noodles seem almost magical. The problem, however, was hidden in plain sight. Many early synthetic coal tar dyes were later discovered to be toxic, with some linked to cancer in laboratory studies. As public health authorities caught up with the boom in artificial food coloring, regulations tightened. Recipes like coal tar dyed Parmesan sauce were quietly removed from cookbooks and menus, leaving only memories of meals that had once dazzled the senses with both flavor and appearance. Families who had enjoyed the whimsical look and creamy taste of the sauce were forced to abandon it, and the era of colorful cream pasta faded almost overnight. Today, coal tar dyed Parmesan sauce survives only in nostalgia, remembered as a strange, playful moment in American culinary history, a time when creativity often outpaced understanding of safety. It is a reminder of how food trends evolve, how tastes change, and how regulations eventually shape the dishes we pass down through generations. The sauce may be gone, but the memory of its unusual appearance and rich creaminess lingers for those who once experienced it. 6. Home canned cream pasta. In the 1940s and 50s, home canning was a common practice in American kitchens. Families preserved fruits, vegetables, and even sauces to stretch their food budgets and prepare for winter months. Among the more adventurous experiments was home canned cream pasta, a dish where creamy white sauce was prepared, poured over noodles, and sealed in jars for storage. The idea was practical, a ready-made meal that could be warmed quickly on busy nights, offering the comfort of a homemade dish without the hours of preparation. For many families, this recipe was a small triumph of ingenuity. Mothers prided themselves on producing perfectly sealed jars, their creamy pasta preserving the rich flavors of fresh milk, butter, and cheese. It was a meal that carried the warmth of the kitchen and the pride of self-sufficiency. Children returned home from school to the smell of creamy noodles, unaware that a labor-intensive preservation process had made their dinner possible. It was a dish that combined convenience, taste, and nostalgia in every bite, embodying the era's spirit of resourcefulness. However, the recipe carried an unseen danger. Canning dairy, particularly in home kitchens without precise temperature control, posed serious risks of botulism, a potentially deadly bacterial infection. As public health authorities increased oversight in the 1950s and 60s, home canned cream sauces became strongly discouraged, and the practice gradually disappeared. Recipes like home canned cream pasta vanished from cookbooks and family traditions, leaving only the memory of a meal that had once promised ease, flavor, and security in a jar. Today, home canned cream pasta exists only in nostalgia, remembered by those who experienced it as a symbol of practicality and care. It is a glimpse into an era when families stretched their creativity to make everyday life smoother, tastier, and more comforting. The dish reminds us that culinary innovation sometimes comes with risk, and that some treasured recipes are lost not because they were unlovable, but because safety and progress reshaped the way Americans cooked and preserved their food. 7. Borax thickened white sauce. During the lean years of the Great Depression and the decades that followed, American kitchens became laboratories of survival. Ingredients were stretched, substitutes were embraced, and nothing that could be repurposed was ignored. Out of this era of scarcity emerged borax thickened white sauce, a creamy pasta topping made by adding tiny amounts of borax to help thicken thin cream or milk when flour and butter were in short supply. It was a quiet kitchen trick, passed along in whispers and handwritten recipe cards, born from necessity rather than culinary ambition. For many families, this sauce meant the difference between a meal that felt complete and one that felt lacking. The borax allowed a watery mixture to transform into something that looked and felt rich, coating noodles in a pale, glossy layer that mimicked traditional cream sauce. On the table, it appeared comforting and familiar, especially to children who never suspected anything unusual. In homes where money was tight and ingredients were rationed, borax thickened white sauce became a symbol of ingenuity, proof that even in hardship, families could still serve something warm, filling, and satisfying. What no one fully understood at the time was the risk behind the shortcut. Borax, though commonly found in households as a cleaning agent and laundry booster, is not safe for consumption. Prolonged exposure can cause serious health problems, and even small amounts can be harmful when ingested repeatedly. As food safety knowledge improved in the mid-20th century, the practice was quietly condemned. Recipes disappeared from community cookbooks, and the sauce that once stood for resilience and thrift was suddenly reclassified as dangerous. Today, borax thickened white sauce is remembered less for its taste and more for what it represents. It tells the story of a generation that did whatever it had to do to put food on the table, even when science had not yet caught up with survival. It is a reminder that some recipes are born not from indulgence, but from desperation, and that the comfort they once offered came at a cost no one understood until it was too late. Nitrate-rich ham cream pasta. In the years after World War II, processed meats became symbols of convenience and prosperity. Refrigerators were fuller, supermarkets were brighter, and cured ham was suddenly everywhere. From this era came nitrate-rich ham cream pasta, a comforting dish built on a silky white sauce folded with generous pieces of heavily cured ham. The flavor was unmistakable, salty, smoky, and deeply satisfying, the kind of meal that made a modest dinner feel hearty and complete. For countless families, it became a dependable favorite, served on busy weeknights and remembered as a taste of home. The popularity of the dish came from more than just flavor. Cured ham lasted longer, required less preparation, and carried an aura of modern efficiency. Home cooks could stretch a single cut across several meals, and restaurants leaned on it for dependable consistency. When mixed into cream sauce, the ham released its savory depth, creating a pasta that felt rich, warming, and indulgent without being complicated. It was a recipe that matched the rhythm of post-war life: fast, filling, and reassuringly familiar. What was not widely known at the time was the hidden cost of that convenience. Many cured meats of the era were treated with high levels of nitrates and nitrites to preserve color and extend shelf life. Over time, scientists began linking excessive nitrate consumption to serious health risks, including an increased chance of certain cancers. As awareness grew and regulations tightened, recipes built around heavily processed meats were quietly reconsidered. The ham used in nitrate-rich ham cream pasta was reformulated, reduced, or replaced, and the original version of the dish slowly disappeared from family tables. Today, the memory of nitrate-rich ham cream pasta carries a bittersweet quality. For those who grew up with it, the taste recalls comfort, routine, and the simple pleasure of a hot meal after a long day. Yet it also stands as a reminder of how little was once understood about what went into everyday food. It marks a moment in culinary history when convenience ruled the kitchen, long before health concerns reshaped the way Americans cooked, cured, and consumed the foods they loved most. 9. Unregulated mold-ripened cream sauce. In the middle of the 20th century, American cooks were quietly borrowing inspiration from Europe, drawn to the romance of aged cheeses, cellar aromas, and old-world techniques. From that curiosity came unregulated mold-ripened cream sauce, a white pasta sauce made by intentionally culturing cream with natural molds to deepen flavor. The result was bold, complex, and unmistakably different from anything found in a supermarket. It carried a sharp, earthy richness that felt sophisticated, almost rebellious, at a time when most kitchens favored predictable, mass-produced ingredients. For families and small restaurants willing to experiment, this sauce became a mark of culinary pride. It was made in basements, pantries, and cool cupboards, where jars of cream were left to develop character over time. When stirred into pasta, the sauce delivered a tangy depth that mimicked imported blue cheeses or aged European creams that were hard to find in post-war America. To those who served it, the dish felt worldly and refined, proof that even a simple bowl of noodles could carry the spirit of tradition and craftsmanship. What few understood, however, was the danger of leaving mold growth unchecked. Without modern food safety standards or controlled cultures, these home-ripened sauces could harbor harmful bacteria and toxic molds. Illnesses were often blamed on bad milk or weak stomachs, never on the process itself. As food science advanced in the 1950s and 60s, authorities began regulating mold-based products, allowing only specific tested cultures in cheese and dairy. Recipes like unregulated mold-ripened cream sauce were quietly abandoned, no longer considered safe for home kitchens. Today, the dish survives only in memory, spoken of by those who once tasted its daring, unforgettable flavor. It represents a brief moment when American cooking flirted with tradition without fully understanding the risks involved. Unregulated mold-ripened cream sauce is remembered not just for its taste, but for what it symbolized: a hunger for depth, authenticity, and old-world character in a rapidly modernizing food culture. It stands as a reminder that some of the most intriguing flavors in history were also the most fragile, disappearing as safety and science reshaped what could remain on the American table. 10. Mercury-contaminated seafood Alfredo. Along America's coasts in the mid-20th century, seafood was more than a meal. It was identity, livelihood, and pride. From that culture came mercury-contaminated seafood Alfredo, a creamy pasta dish loaded with fresh-caught fish and shellfish folded into rich white sauce. The flavors were clean and briny, balanced by butter, cream, and garlic, creating a dish that felt both elegant and deeply rooted in local tradition. For families in fishing towns and for diners seeking a taste of the sea, this Alfredo became a symbol of abundance and connection to the water. The dish thrived in a time when fresh meant whatever came off the boats that morning. Cooks trusted the ocean, believing its bounty was as pure as it was generous. Restaurants proudly advertised their seafood cream pastas as wholesome and nourishing, and home kitchens followed suit, turning the day's catch into comforting, creamy meals. It wasn't just about taste, it was about honoring the work of fishermen, the rhythm of tides, and the sense that nature itself was feeding the table. What no one could see was what the water had begun to carry. As industrial pollution increased in the mid-20th century, mercury entered rivers and oceans, quietly accumulating in fish and shellfish. The very seafood that made these Alfredo dishes so beloved was slowly becoming unsafe. Over time, scientists uncovered the risks. Mercury exposure could damage the nervous system, especially in children and pregnant women. Health advisories followed, warning against consuming certain species too often. Recipes that once celebrated unrestricted seafood abundance were suddenly shadowed by fear and caution. Today, mercury-contaminated seafood Alfredo exists only in memory, recalled as a dish that tasted like the ocean itself, rich, comforting, and honest. For those who grew up with it, the loss feels personal, a reminder of a time when the sea was trusted without question. The dish tells a larger story about how industrial progress altered even the most traditional meals, and how something once viewed as a gift of nature became a lesson in vulnerability. It is not remembered for danger alone, but for the warmth, pride, and connection it once brought to tables along the coast. When we look back at these forgotten white sauce pastas, what we really see is not just a series of banned ingredients or outdated cooking methods. We see families gathered around dinner tables. We hear the sound of forks against porcelain. We feel the comfort of meals made with care, even when knowledge was incomplete. Each dish in this story carried more than flavor. It carried the spirit of its time. Some were born from innovation, others from hardship, tradition, or convenience. And while science eventually proved that many of them were unsafe, it cannot erase what they once meant to the people who cooked and shared them. These recipes were not abandoned because they were unloved. They were abandoned because progress demanded it. Safety replaced tradition. Regulation replaced improvisation. And in that exchange, something quietly slipped into history. Yet remembering these dishes is not about longing for what was dangerous. It's about honoring the human story behind food, the experiments, the hopes, the mistakes, and the small comforts that defined everyday life for millions of families. Because when a recipe disappears, it doesn't just leave a kitchen. It leaves behind memories. It leaves behind stories. It leaves behind a version of the world that once existed and will never return. And sometimes understanding what we lost helps us appreciate what we have.